Judgment, the silent destroyer. What if the thing destroying your relationships, your health, your creativity, your spiritual growth, and the world around you, it isn't hatred? What if it isn't greed or fear or even ignorance? What if it's something far more subtle, far more accepted, far more embedded in the daily fabric of human life than any of those things? What if it's judgment? Not the loud, obvious kind, not the hatred that wears its face openly. I'm talking about the quiet, constant, deeply conditioned stream of evaluation that most human beings run about themselves, about others, about the world, every single moment of every single day. So today, we go deep on judgment, what it actually is, what it destroys, why we do it, and what the world, your world, could look like if you chose something radically different. So let's go. Let's talk about what judgment actually is. So let's start with a little bit of clarity, because one of the most important things we need to establish today is a large distinction there is that most people have never been taught. Judgment and discernment are two totally different things. Those are not the same things. Discernment is a gift. It is the soul's ability to perceive clearly, to distinguish truth from deception, alignment from misalignment, what serves your growth from what diminishes it. Discernment is neutral. It is rooted in wisdom, not ego. It says, this does not resonate with me or my soul's truth, and moves accordingly. No condemnation, no superiority, just clear seeing. Judgment, on the other hand, is something else entirely. Judgment is ego wearing the mask of discernment. It doesn't just observe, it condemns. It doesn't just notice differences, it ranks them. Judgment says not only, this is not for me, but this is wrong, or this is lesser. This person is beneath me. This version of life is not acceptable, maybe. Discernment creates clarity. Judgment creates separation. And that separation between you and others, between you and yourself, is where the destruction begins. And there are levels of destruction, so let's go over those. Let's talk about what judgment actually does, because it really is not harmless. It operates on multiple levels simultaneously, and most people have no idea the damage is causing them in real time. The first level is judgment of the self and what it does to the self. This is where it begins for most people. Long before we judge others, we have already built an elaborate internal court system where we sit as both judge and defendant, and the verdicts are almost always guilty. Not good enough, not smart enough, not spiritual enough, not successful enough. You're too emotional or too sensitive, too much, not enough. It's always something, right? This relentless internal judgment does something devastating. It severs you from yourself, who you truly are. It creates a gap between who you actually are, your raw, authentic, sovereign soul, and the performance you offer the world to avoid being found out. Over time, that gap becomes so wide that you forget there was ever a version of you that existed before the verdict was handed down, so to speak. The self-judging mind cannot create freely, cannot love fully, cannot show up authentically, because it is always monitoring, editing, filtering, managing before anything real has a chance to emerge. The second level is our relationships and judgments of them. Judgment is the silent poison in every broken relationship that ever existed. Not the not the dramatic betrayals. Those are obvious. I'm talking about the slow erosion, the subtle keeping of score, the constant unconscious evaluation of whether the person in front of you is measuring up to your standards. When you judge another person, even silently, even privately, they can feel it. Energy is not invisible. The body knows when it is being assessed rather than accepted. And people cannot be fully present, fully open, fully themselves in a field of judgment. In turn, they contract, they shrink, they perform, and then they become defensive. And then you wonder why your relationship feels surface level, why the real conversations never happen, why intimacy feels impossible. Well, judgment built that wall. The third level is our creative and spiritual potential, we'll say. Here is something the mystics understood profoundly. Creativity and judgment cannot, I repeat, cannot coexist in the same moment. The moment the judging mind enters the creative space, this isn't good enough. Who do you think you are? What will they say? The creative flow stops completely. And spiritually, genuine awakening requires vulnerability, right? It requires the willingness to not know, to be a beginner, to look foolish along the path. Judgment, particularly the fear of being judged, keeps more souls from their spiritual path than almost any other force. People will not meditate in public. They will not speak their truth. They will not explore consciousness. They won't admit what they know in their soul to be real. They know in their soul to be real, but because of fear of judgment from their family, from their peers, their culture is simply too great. Judgment is keeping souls asleep. So now the fourth level is collective, society itself. Scale the personal up to the collective, and what do you get? You get division, tribalism, the inability of human beings to see each other as souls rather than categories. Every war, every genocide, every systemic oppression in human history began with judgment, with the decision made by individuals, then groups, then institutions, that some people were lesser, that some ways of being were unacceptable, that some souls were worth less than others. Judgment at the collective level is not just destructive, it is basically it's civilization ending. That's pretty intense. So let's look at why we judge. So why do we do it, right? If judgment is so destructive, why is it so universal? Why does everybody do it, right? Because judgment is basically fear in disguise. So when you judge another person, their choices, their lifestyle, their beliefs, their appearance, you are almost always projecting the parts of yourself you have not yet accepted. The things in others that trigger your harshest judgment are almost always mirrors of your own unhealed wounds, your own, let's say, suppressed desires, your own rejected aspects of yourself. See it that way. The mystics called this the shadow. Carl Jung built an entire psychological framework around this. Every quality that you condemn loudly in another is a quality living quietly, unacknowledged, somewhere inside of you. Judgment is also a defense mechanism. As long as I am focused on what is wrong with you, I don't have to look at what is unresolved in me. It is far easier to sit in the courtroom as the judge than to take the stand yourself. And then there is the deepest layer, the fear of your own judgment from others. This one shapes entire lives. People choose careers based on it. They choose partners based on it. They suppress gifts, silence knowing, shrink their souls, all to avoid the imagined verdict of the crowd. The fear of judgment is one of the most powerful forces governing human behavior on this entire planet in this earthly realm. And it operates almost entirely below the level of conscious awareness. Let's just stop and think about a world, what kind of world it would be without judgment. Let me just ask you something. So, close your eyes for a moment if you want to. But imagine a world where you woke up tomorrow and all judgment was gone, not just suppressed, but completely gone. Imagine that from yourself and from others. What would you do that you've been afraid to do? What would you say that you've been sort of editing out for years? What version of yourself would finally be free to walk out of the door? Imagine no judgment. Now just scale that up. In a world where there's no judgment, children growing up knowing that their worth is not conditional anymore. They don't spend their lives trying to earn love they were always entitled to simply by existing. They create freely now. They explore fearlessly. They become fully what they came here to be. In a world without judgment, difference is no longer a threat, but rather it's a gift. Different cultures, different beliefs, different ways of experiencing this reality are received as facets of a larger, more beautiful whole, not as dangers to be condemned or enemies to be defeated. In a world without judgment, healing now happens faster because shame, which is judgment turned inward, is the single greatest barrier to healing that exists in the human condition. Remove that shame, remove the verdict, and now the soul begins to restore itself naturally. In a world without judgment, replaced entirely by unconditional love and genuine discernment, human beings would finally be free to become what they actually are. Not what they performed, not what they survived into, but what they really are or who they really are at their essential core. This is not utopian fantasy. It begins with one single decision made by one soul at a time, starting with the one making it right now. The practice, right? So the practice of choosing differently, I would say it would be called. So how do you actually move from judgment to discernment, from condemnation to compassion? Well, first you have to become aware, right? First you catch it. You develop the awareness to notice when the judging mind has been activated. Not to judge yourself for judging, that is just another layer of the same trap, right? But simply to see it and sit in it. There it is, judgment. What is this really about? Secondly, you get curiosity. You get curious instead of conclusive. Instead of that person is wrong, you ask, why does this trigger me? What is this showing me about myself? Curiosity is the antidote to judgment, in my opinion. You cannot be simultaneously curious and condemning, right? Thirdly, you practice now seeing the soul behind the behavior. Every person that you are tempted to judge is an ancient soul, wounded, conditioned, doing the very best that they can with the consciousness that they currently have access to, including you, including the ones who have hurt you. This is not naivety. This is not the passive New Age version of love that lets everything slide. You can use discernment, clearly seeing what is not aligned, what is harmful, what you will not participate in, while releasing the judgment that condemns the soul behind it. That is the practice. And it is one of the most spiritually advanced things a human being can do. So, from the deepest, most grounded space, here is the truth that I want to leave you with. So, every time you judge yourself or another person, just any judge, you are participating in the very system of separation that keeps humanity from its full potential. You're the problem. You are adding to the wall rather than dissolving it. And every time that you choose discernment over judgment, curiosity over condemnation, compassion over verdict, you are now doing something quietly revolutionary. You are choosing to see this world the way your soul saw it before it even arrived here, before the conditioning, before the fear, before the court was called into session. You are choosing love, not the passive, agreeable, offend no one version of love, but the real kind, the fierce kind, the kind that looks at another soul, broken, confused, lost, even harmful, and it says, I see what you are beneath all of that, and it is not what you are being right now. That kind of love changes people. It changed every person it ever touched throughout all of human history. Imagine that. And it begins always with the way you speak to the soul, to yourself, the way you speak to your soul in the mirror. So release the verdict, reclaim the witness. That is where your freedom ultimately lives. So stay conscious, stay sovereign, and keep creating. Judgment is the thief of serenity. Remember that.